special morning edition. What up, Coop, man? How you doing, brother?
What up? What up? What up?
I got my Starbucks and everything, man. I'm ready to go, man. You asked for it. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this KRS-One and Big Daddy Kane recap from their verses from Sunday night. I don't want to date our show too much, but it is what it is. It's the Tuesday after we gave everybody a chance to really kind of get their reviews out there, and we're gonna do ours because we did a preview of it. And before we get into it, I really feel like I picked better songs for Kane than he picked for himself. I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that. But yeah, what did you think about the verses, man?
I loved it. I thought it was wonderfully put together. Performance-wise, and we know this from seeing them both together live. I mean,
Right.
these are the two greatest on-stage performers in the history of rap. That was on full display on Sunday night. But also, too, part of what made it wonderful is that they employed the other elements of hip hop into the verses,
They
and
do
it was
that
the
at their
first.
show too.
They
Yeah.
do that in their shows too, and that was a beautiful thing, I think, for our younger generation to see, like for them to really dedicate some time to the DJ and to the break dancers and the b-boys.
You know what? Speaking of which, and I love that part of it too. I was on Star's show yesterday. He was talking about it. And what up to Star? I know he don't like shout outs, but what up, Star? He brought up a good point though, in pointing out KRS-One's performance. He said that for a lot of younger people, and that's what made me think of that when you said the younger audience. A lot of younger people who might not be totally familiar with KRS's music like that, he doesn't feel like KRS did a really good job of executing on those records the way that they could be executed on. It was like he kind of did his alternative version of my philosophy and things like that. And I get it. You've been performing this record for 30 years and you want to switch it up, but this is the opportunity for people who haven't really, who aren't really familiar with your catalog to be able to take it in the way that they hear it on record. You know what I mean? I think Kane did a much better job of that, and I don't want to get too ahead of our show and start talking about that, but I do believe that Kane outperformed KRS in that way stylistically. But that's just, that's what I was thinking when I saw it. What do you think on that level, like when it comes to the performance side of it?
I think Star had a point because here's what I thought from watching the verses from KRS-One's perspective, from somebody who's seen him live a
Hmm.
few times now. I wouldn't call it an off night, but it wasn't his best night performance wise.
It wasn't. Because, and again, we're rating him on a very high scale because, I mean, I've said it myself. You've said it as well. He's the best performer in hip hop. And I think a lot of that's because of the voice, the clarity, and all of that. And when you say off night, yeah, I think that the breath control, especially in relation to Kane, it was a vast difference because Kane was hitting everything, and it was almost like when Kane was hitting them with the real fast flows and shit. KRS was like, "Yo, slow it down," type of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, so okay, so this is what I mean. It's like KRS's off night. It's like, remember like when Michael Jordan would have an off night and he would go like 7 for 19 and have like 22, 23 points? That's like KRS's off night on stage. So his off night is still a pretty strong game.
Yeah,
But I think what really happened is that Kane had one of his best nights too when KRS had an off night. Because, I mean, Mike, to go to the breath control right quick, and this is one of my notes. Kane's breath control as an MC is the best ever.
it is,
That's what I realized last night. There's
especially
not
on a
a
live level,
like on
even
a
in the
live
studio,
level.
but on a live level, yeah, man.
Yeah, like on a live level and on a period level, Mike, because it's like when you go back and listen to his records and you hear him live, he sounds like the same guy in the studio that he does on stage. The delivery is the same, the clarity is the same, the punching is the same, the
In a
intensity is the
30-year
same.
difference. In a 30-year
And
difference.
30 years later, Mike,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
it's
Like,
insane. He's 53 years old.
and you want to know what I thought about? Like, do you remember like when our generation was impressed when like Jay could do like nigga what, nigga who, like on the Unplugged Live? Like
Right.
Kane did that for 2 hours last night.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm
Even
saying?
more. Even more. And it was,
Yeah.
and then you're moving around on top of that. I mean, listen, Kane
Ooh.
clearly, straight up, outperformed KRS.
So Mike,
Go ahead.
also too, you want to know what I like? Kane talked this shit too. Like one of my other notes is like he was like, these dudes be scared to rap at 120 BPMs. Like he's kind of pointing out how it's like, yo, these cats can spit, but like, what I mean, they can't spit like this, like with me on this level, you know?
It was a lot of shit talking, but the shit talking was like some iconic Mount Rushmore type of shit talking. Damian Frederick says, I thought you guys were sick. It's good to have my go-to hip-hop content today. Yeah, what up, man? Tell a friend, tell a friend. We're live right now. We're going to recap this thing. We want to know what y'all thought about the verses as well. And we're going to really break it down. And I guess, obviously you got to pick a winner as a versus thing, but I want to talk about a lot of sideline things with it too. DeCarlo says KRS was being lazy in his performance side. He had the energy, but chose not to execute the performance for some reason. I agree with that. I think he was playing more to the crowd than to the, I guess, the versus television viewer per se. I think that's one fair thing too, because a person like KRS and his live performance is more so catered to the audience that's there as opposed to the audience on television that's watching, right?
That's true, but he's also KRS, and so he knows where he is and he knows what's going on, and he's a master of ceremonies, Mike. So he knows how to get agile and switch it up. So it's like we're not just gonna sit up there and necessarily say, oh well, he was just feeding more into the crowd because that's what he does. It's like that's KRS. He can do anything when he's on stage.
Did he lean more towards his catalog and the strength of
That's
his
that. That's what I
catalog?
think. So if you want to say lazy, it was maybe lazy in the context of he leaned heavily on the catalog because he knew he had it, and that's what I mean, Mike. He kind of treated his verses the way I treated his verses. It's like Mike. He left stuff out. He left a bunch of stuff out.
He left a bunch of stuff out. Let's go to what he did play. Let me go to the track list. He started out with Criminal Minded. Then he did Your Joint, still number one. That's the one that you started it off with.
Right. I told
And
you
then
our
he
list was
came,
very comparable, Mike. Yeah.
yeah, he came with MCs Out Like They Don't Know. And then he did the MC. You know what? One of these things too that I want to point out. He was overlapping records. Like a couple of times he played two records in a setting. Like he'll play half of a record. So on one round he did, let me get back to the track list. On one round he did the MC, then he did Out of Here. And then he
Yeah.
did Part-Time Suckers, he did You Feel That. And then he did it was another round where it
Yeah.
was 9
Towards the
millimeter
end.
goes bang, and then he did Oh Yeah. And
Oh
I'm like,
yeah. I thought that was great. I thought those were that was the best pairing that he did.
yeah, that was crazy. And then he was about to go to self-destruction and Kane stopped him. I mean,
Didn't
he
Kane
just,
have, hold on? Didn't Kane have a better verse?
yeah, I think so. You know what? This is what I do want to say though, and it's unfortunate. And I give props to Kane for going out there and performing his ass off, and bringing forth, going against somebody with a catalog that strong. It's not a lot of people in hip hop, and we covered that like a couple of weeks ago that have the strength of catalog as KRS. I don't think that KRS was supposed to be the matchup for Kane. It's hard for me to believe that the people at Versus weren't listening to the public. First of all, they did this, right? The fact that they actually did KRS versus Kane lets you know that they were actually listening to the culture, listening to people talk. But the talks were really a Kane versus Rakim. That's what it was all about. Kane versus Rakim. Kane versus Rakim. I find it very hard to believe that Swiss Beats, Timbaland, or whoever at Versus didn't approach Rakim and be like, look, let's do this Kane versus Rakim thing. This is what the people want. I don't know, but it appears that Rakim declined that, and they had to settle for KRS versus Kane. And that puts Kane in a backward stance because really that's not his matchup because KRS's catalog is just so long. And we saw that the other night. KRS's matchup was supposed to be, I think, LL. I think that's the best matchup for both of them. And the fact that Rakim in my opinion, I have no real facts on this. The fact that Rakim seemed to have declined what people really wanted to see. Now we're not gonna get two verses that we really needed. Now
So
there's
let's back.
nobody for LL. Now, well, Rakim's not gonna do it. It's just
Well,
there's
well,
nobody for him now.
well, hold on. Let's back up for a second.
Uh huh.
Didn't LL kind of duck KRS before the Rakim
He
Kane
did.
thing was even the thing? So that's where all of this kind of got
You're
misappropriated if
right.
you really want to get back to it, because you're saying the KRS LL thing should have happened. Well, KRS challenged LL,
My thing
correct?
is, who does LL want? You're right, because KRS got on Fat Joe's podcast and said he wanted. He said he would crush LL.
Yeah, he did. He's talking
And
real
and
big.
then LL was asked about that, and LL said he didn't think that was a good matchup or something like that. Yada yada.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, you're right. That threw off the balance. But again, let's get back to Rakim. My favorite lyricist, by the way. You know what I mean? I hate to say these things, but that's what people really wanted. And no one was, respectfully, and I think KRS proved the other night that he is the elite MC of all the people in that conversation. And he even said that on stage. People talk about Rakim, Kane, KRS, Cool G Rap. He also highlighted the
That's
fact
right.
that Cool G Rap declined to come.
I want to get into that.
We'll get into that. And Slick Rick, and he said, I'm number one. And I think he proved that, right? But at the end of the day, man, nobody was out here saying, yo, we need a KRS versus. We need a KRS versus. People wanted that Kane and Rakim versus. And I feel like versus had to settle for the KRS and Kane because A, they're friends, they're cool, they're gonna do it anyway. And B, Rakim just wasn't going to go up against Kane. And I believe that's because Kane is such a vicious performer and Rakim wanted no parts of what we saw Kane do the other night on stage. I hate to say that as a super Rakim fan, but that's what it appears to be. I mean, we seen it. We seen it when we saw both of those guys performing a couple of months together on the same stage. Rakim didn't want to be performing side by side with Kane, and that's unfortunate because now we don't get the matchup that we really needed. And I agree with you. LL did decline the KRS, but I think if we would have kept pushing for it, it could have happened. You know what I mean? Because LL backs down from nothing. Now that's one thing we do know about LL Cool J. Battle anybody, I don't care who you tell.
Right. Except for when KRS-One challenged him.
But you remember when KRS-One went out there and apologized to LL when it appeared that he dissed LL?
Right, but we're not out here handing out hall passes to anybody. So
I
we're gonna
agree.
be talking about we're gonna be. I mean, because to be honest with you, in order to talk about this accurately, we're gonna have to be honest about some like iconic figures. So let's go to a couple of things.
LL duck KRS.
So
Rakim
we yeah.
possibly duck Kane. We don't know that, but we do
So
know
let's go.
LL duck KRS.
So let's go to the Rakim thing too, because here's something that I realized last night from hearing Kane in KRS's catalog and just knowing what Rakim's catalog is.
Mm-hmm.
Rakim has the songs. He has the timeless songs. KRS actually has the longevity and the era of making great records in different eras that nobody else from that era other than LL can really say. But what I really heard is that you want to know what? Kane's production just was not as strong as Rakim's and as KRS's.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean not as strong in the sense that his records sound more dated than theirs do,
You're right.
even though it was all made around the same time. And I think that's the biggest drawback to Kane. It's like, because Mike, when I was listening to his bars, I was like, no, there's not 10 guys that can do that.
No,
And
that's real.
and so the fact that those records production wise just sound more dated than KRS and Rakim stuff is what I think really, really hurts Kane. Because it's like I was telling you right before we got on, he has everything and he showed it last night. This dude can dance. He can rap his ass off, Mike. There aren't too many guys that can rap with him. He has presence. He has persona. He knows history.
Versatility.
He's versatile. And Mike, he's iconic in the sense I wrote down some of the things that he was saying. Of course, we all know the song MVP by Big L is inspired from Kane's bars. It's
Just
literally
vibing.
taken from the bars.
Yeah.
But I was actually listening to some of the other bars. Mike, your arm's too short to box with God. That's Kane.
Yep.
Mike, another thing that I realize is that, he's inspired the guys that we know, but he's also inspired, like I thought about AZ yesterday. I was like, you want to know what? AZ got a lot of Kane in him with how smooth and how the flow comes out. You know what I'm saying? He's really, really iconic more than his catalog is. Like we said a couple of shows before, the catalog may not be what you want it to be, but like literally everything else is there. Like Mike, when he was jumping up and down, when the show was starting and spitting like that, I was like, who can do that?
It's insane, man. I mean,
Mike,
I don't
in
want
my
to.
lifetime, Mike, he was spitting the bar talking about in my lifetime. I'm like, that's the J shit.
Look, I'm gonna say it. Is Kane? Did we just see the other night on this versus that Kane is taking the spot as hip hop's best live performer? Is Kane hip hop's best live performer? I mean, just straight up in a vacuum, because you brought up a lot of really good points. Production wise, KRS shit is kind of catered to a live audience, right? So he has the momentum of the songs. Like when MCs Act Like They Don't Know comes in, like you're immediately like in there. Kane don't have that production help, but just in a vacuum as an individual performer, it's hard to say that anybody's a better performer than this 53-year-old Big Daddy Kane who was out there doing what we saw him do.
That was masterful, Mike. It was
I'm ready to say he's
what
the
he
best
did.
performer in hip hop.
You can, Mike. He did everything. He literally got his 53-year-old ass over the rail, got up in the crowd. He danced. He did the old school move with what's his name when he bought him out. Like he did everything, Mike. Freestyles, bars, like you. Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of the choice of doing 4 freestyles, and I want to get into that because I think that Kane, I mean, he outperformed KRS. For the people who are just coming in the room, we're going to get to the chat too because y'all are commenting a lot. We want to know who y'all think, won the verses, but I think that Kane outperformed KRS. I'll say that again. But if we're going to crown a winner, it's going to have to be KRS based on the records, right? Because this is versus, and it is about the strength of the records and all that. And Kane had very small room for error when it comes to selecting records, and I think him doing 4 freestyles wasn't a good choice. I think people saw what Jada did on that Dipset and Locks versus, and was like, okay, that opened up a door so we can do some freestyles or whatnot. But that, who shot your freestyle is, that's one of those things that once it dropped, people knew what it was. You're not going to hit people with, new freestyles. And if you're going to do that, do one. I know, let me go to my list real quick. I'm going to go to my list.
I was cool with him doing 2 freestyles. I do feel like 4 was too much, but I can take 2 freestyles from Kane. I mean, it's Kane.
I mean, at the top of the show and maybe towards the bottom of the show. You want to separate them, but they all kind of came together.
Yeah, they all kind of stacked in.
They came during a time period where it seemed like he was running out of records too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so it wasn't really spaced out too well. But, what you said about the production is on point because when you listen to Platinum Plus, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a difference. Like you can hear it. It's like, no, he need more of that.
Yeah, he does. And he was taking it on.
I told you that was that verse that just reminded cats. It's like, yo, that's Kane. Like give Kane a primo beat. Like you see what it sound like. Like
I think a couple of songs that I chose that he didn't put in his show was Class of '87.
Mm-hmm.
I wish he would have done that.
He could have done that instead of one of the freestyles. That would have been a better look.
He should have done Macula's Theory. I mean,
that was the biggest omission, I think, especially when he was doing the whole pimp talk thing.
Yeah, man. I'm not mad at him doing Pimpin' Ain't Easy or whatnot with, you know what I'm saying?
No, he could have done them both back to back. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like his old pimp shit, his new pimp shit, Because
what his track list was looking like, I'm going to go down his track list, and I got it on the screen for the people in the chat or people that are watching live. But let me go to the chat real quick since I mentioned that. TJ said, I think Kane had better breath control, but KRS had the crowd and the bigger songs. Yeah, that was the telltale of the night.
Yeah, the record.
Terminator 2, what up, Terminator? He says, the Big L joint Kane did killed KRS's whole catalog. Terminator thinks that Kane won.
He
King
didn't
Mark
win,
says
but
Kane was spitting fire in those freestyles, though. He was.
he was.
But
Yeah,
again,
that's what I'm
Versus is
saying. It's
about the
Kane. I mean, like
records.
you're not gonna hear no like, like if Kane's doing a freestyle, it's about to be some shit. So that's not really, we expecting him to do that.
All right, so Kane did Just Rhyming, Enough Respect. I like Enough Respect being
I
number
like
two.
enough respect.
I like
Yeah.
Young, Gifted, and Black coming in after that. Set It Off, Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
I Get the Job Done. It was a miss, not a miss, but there's a typo here. It says Get the Job Fun. Get the Job Done. Pimpin' Ain't Easy. Raw. And then he jumped into like two freestyle. See, that's when it seemed like, he was running out of records. Like if he was going to do these freestyles, I would have liked him to be, kind of sectioned out throughout his catalog. Smooth Operator. He did the Wrath of Kane. Ain't No Half Stepping. These are heavy records. Platinum Plus. Then another freestyle. And another victory. He did the Symphony. And he ended it with Warm It Up Kane. Speaking of the Symphony, you wanted to get into that Cool G rap thing?
Yeah. I also want to say, we need to go back and give Long Live the Kane its props. Like it's a classic album and people know it, but not enough people talk about it. And those records from that album more than anything else, because that is obviously the strongest part of his catalog, that was on full display last night. And so like we need to give Long Live the Kane, like that classic album, some more, just some more flowers, because it doesn't normally get mentioned as often as it should with the other classic albums from his era.
I think it hurts because it came right after Paid in Full.
Right.
And same year as Follow the Leader too. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you look. Again,
Hard.
I understand that Kane is the best performer in hip hop, and Rakim is just, to me, the greatest lyricist in hip hop, and probably not the strongest performer when you look at those two. But he's a strong performer. I'm not gonna say he's
how
not.
about this?
I've seen
Kane
him
is
live
closer.
many
How about this,
times.
Mike? Kane is closer to Rakim as a lyricist than Rakim is closer to Kane as a performer. You feel what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, definitely. But he still
Yeah.
should have done it, man. That would have been love, man. Because at the end of the day, that conversation's not gonna go away. Just like the Nas and Jay thing. Even if niggas went out there and let's just say Nas and Jay did a versus, everybody's gonna have their opinion anyway. Like most of the people who fuck with Nas are gonna go that way. Most of the people that fuck with Jay are gonna go that way. So I don't understand why the Rakim and Kane thing didn't happen, because it just put Kane in a position against somebody who just has a long catalog. It's a mismatch in that way, and we all see that Kane outperformed KRS, and the only deciding factor here was just the fact that KRS just kept coming with hits.
Right, he did. And you want to know what I realized last night about KRS real quick, and then we can get into the symphony thing in G-Rap? Step Into a World is a more important record than even I thought in KRS's catalog. People went crazy when that shit dropped. I was like, oh, y'all love that record like
It's
that?
dope, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know. Like, I mean, I love that record. I didn't know because, that was probably the last big hit record. That was his last hit, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, he was the one that kind of took on what LL Cool J's doing right now with Rock the Bells, which I think is great, like being an ambassador for his era. Like, KRS took on that in the 90s.
Right.
And I think when records like Step Into a World came out, it was like, oh shit, this nigga's taking it back. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so he took on that persona early, and I think that added to his longevity too. I think that there was for those elites, and we're about to get into G-Rap because he's in that class with KRS, Kane, Rakim, yada yada. KRS, Rakim, Kane, Cool G-Rap, whatever. I think a lot of them were struggling to find identities in the 90s. in that next era of hip hop, and KRS didn't struggle with that. KRS knew who he was. He was the teacher. He took on that persona, and he rode with it, and he
Well,
was
hold
able to
on. See,
continue.
but he took that persona early in the '80s, and so as he became like kind of like a OG in the game and a gatekeeper, he had set himself up to be that.
Yeah, you're right.
He set himself up
Before
to
you
be
get
that.
into G-Rap, how do you feel about the fact that KRS left LL out of that? Not to get on LL again, but he said Slick Rick, him, G-Rap, Rakim, and Kane. How do you feel about the fact that LL was left out of that? You think that was an accident, or just LL's not in those conversations?
Here's the thing about it, Mike, and here's always been the thing with LL. No, Mike, that was the conversation. LL was always considered to be six. It was like those guys were the greatest MCs. And then after that, it was LL because like KRS was talking on some rap shit. You know what I'm saying? And on some rap shit, those were the conversations. It was like the MCs were Rakim, KRS-One, Kane, Cool G Rap, and Slick Rick. And LL was a dope ass MC, but he made hit records more than he was a dope ass MC the way those guys were.
I have
and
a theory.
Slick Rick was kind of probably the one that was kind of in between because the style wise and voice wise, he was able to do things that those other guys weren't doing. And that's kind of why KRS even brought him up last, because everybody knew Slick Rick was great, but he wasn't like lyrically inclined in terms of the way he put his songs together, the way that Kane and Rakim and G-Rap and KRS did. Slick Rick and LL actually are a little before them, and so the way they put songs together is different.
Well, the thing about Slick Rick, too, he brought something into the game. I mean, the people were telling stories before, but he elevated that level of the game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
he changed it. He changed it.
And he was making records that were huge. I mean, it's arguable for anybody in that era that, the Great Adventures of Slick Rick, probably the best album of all of them. I'm going to go with Paid in Full. But for somebody in that era, you look at songs like Teenage Love, you look at songs like A Children's Story, you look at songs like Mona Lisa.
Mike, I want you to stop for a second because you want to know what my real takeaway from yesterday's verses was? Slick Rick and LL need to do a verses because Slick Rick's hits are so monstrous that it is enough to contend with LL. Because listen to this. Like, we're talking about the author of Lottie Dottie, The Show, and Children's Story, Mike. Those three records are bigger than any three records that any of those other five guys we talked about have, and that's LL included. How about that?
What LL got for Hey Young World?
Mike, that's what I'm about to say. Then you go to stuff like Mona Lisa, Teenage World, Hey Young Love, and then he can go to like some of the street talking stuff, Frozen with Raekwon, like some of the stuff that he did in the 90s, like Slick Rick and LL is actually a good versus. They actually come from the same time.
That, you know what? You might not know this, but I know this because, I do a lot of journalistic work for According to Hip Hop. They have the same birthday too. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Interesting. But it is fascinating. I hate to say it, I just think that Slick Rick, if he had one more album, or maybe one more album that's slightly comparable to The Great Adventures, or two more albums that have a marginal amount of hits on it, then I would say yes. But I just think that unfortunately, Slick Rick just doesn't have enough if we talking about going 20 for 20 with LL. But I agree with you. The ones that he would play, LL ain't got no answer for. And that's just real. And I thought that was very interesting that he was in that, little blurb that KRS put out there and not LL. Because, I don't know, I've always thought that people just mention, and again, I grew up in the 90s. So I've always been told by my OGs that it was KRS, Cool G Rap, Rakim, and Kane. I've never heard Slick Rick even inserted in that conversation like that, but KRS did it, so he feels highly of him. I would like to see Slick Rick do it, honestly, and I'm trying to think of maybe some of the features that Slick Rick has that could probably contend with that kind of helps his catalog going. But yeah, I don't think that's as bad as a matchup, because LL, there's nobody else out there for LL, honestly, other than Slick Rick, because people are saying Busta Rhymes, but I just think that that's just such an era difference.
Yeah, it is. It's too much of an era difference, especially for how Busta has kind of slid into other eras too.
I don't think there's anybody else out there for Busta either. You know,
Not truly,
yeah.
not truly. But
LL's
yeah,
live performance is crazy. That's what Terminator said.
yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying though. This Slick Rick. I mean, you know, Dougie Fresh gonna come out and like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's a whole performance too. These are like the guys from this era. I mean, they're all performers.
Could we play stuff that has samples, Slick Rick?
I mean that that's endless, Mike. That's
Yeah,
what I'm saying. Like, what
that's what
if
I'm
he were to
saying. We
do
could
Lottie
get
Dottie?
creative.
Like, what if he were to
Yeah,
do Lottie Dottie and then have Snoop come out and do his? You know what I'm saying?
yeah. Now I know you said this about Kane a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last episode or whatnot. That Kane's impact has superseded his catalog. Slick Rick is definitely that. He's probably the catalyst of that. Like Slick Rick's impact, he's like your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. At least
He
my
is.
favorite rapper's favorite rapper. I mean, clearly
He's
Ghostface is
my
in.
favorite rapper's favorite rapper too. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like Mike. There's a picture. Like, I think if I'm not mistaken, like the only rapper hanging in Nas's house is the painting he has of Slick Rick. Like, what does that tell you?
Nas is clearly from the Slick Rick tree. Ghostface is from the Slick Rick tree. Q-Tip is from the Slick Rick tree.
Jay, Mike.
You think Jay is Slick Rick
Kind of
personified?
too, because he's like kind of charismatic. He's witty. You know what I'm saying? He's very like poignant, like the way that he kind of delivers stuff is kind of off kilt. Like, yeah, he is to a degree too. I mean, he's more of a Kane guy, but I mean, like you can hear the influence from all these guys and the guys that came after them who are great. And Slick Rick is one of those guys. And Mike, I'm also with you on this too. From that era, outside of Paid in Full, I think The Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick is the best album from that era.
It probably is. I mean, that shit
Like,
is
I mean,
crazy.
I would say
Like just like we say about Paid in
like
Full, I
Paid in
think.
Full, It Takes a Nations, and The Greatest Adventures of Slick Rick.
Well, the difference between those are definitely the three. And I think It Takes a Nation could possibly be the greatest hip hop album ever. But that's on some other shit. But as far as like
Arguably.
the way that Paid in Full and Great Adventures are put together, I think both of those albums are like one of the few hip hop albums that you can state that have 3 to possibly 4 top 50 hip hop songs on them all time. Like I think Mona Lisa is possibly a top 50. I
No,
think
it is.
that Hey Young World is a top 50. And I know the Children's Story is a top 50.
And you didn't even bring up Teenage Love.
I didn't even bring up Teenage Love. I
And
mean,
Mike,
that
and
would be a
here's what I mean:
stretch.
the catalog is deeper than you think because it's that album is so great. It's like Slick Rick can perform almost that whole album. Like, he's gonna play The Ruler's Back, The Moment I Feared, Let's Go
Yeah.
Crazy, Lick the Balls, Treat Her Like a Prostitute. Like, he can perform all those songs. Those are all great records.
He could get creative and, like I said, do some of the stuff that is clearly inspired by him, or "We Like to Party" from Beyonce or something that
Like, he
samples
can,
him,
like
or "Guess Who's Back," "The Ruler's Back." You know what I mean? Shit like
right.
that. Like he could, yeah.
Mike, he can get the 20 tracks though, because he can do about 10 off that one album. He's got Lottie Dottie in the show. He's got Street Talking. He's got Frozen with Raekwon.
He's
I
gonna
mean,
need
he
a
can even go.
director.
He can go sitting in my car with JD and play that if he wants to. He's got enough to get through it.
Yo, my nigga, that song with JD is incredible. That's actually my favorite Jermaine Dupri song, "Fresh."
Really?
Fresh is crazy.
Yeah,
Fresh is crazy.
Yeah, Mike, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, he got stuff. He can
Fresh
do
is
it. He can do it with L. It's more
Yeah.
than doable.
You know what? You brought up a good point, man. I would like to see Slick Rick and LL. That's the only person left for him. I mean, maybe KRS was putting the nugget out for that. I don't know, but yeah, I think
Because here's the thing, Mike. Listen to these records from Slick Rick we just named. What LL got for a lot of those?
No, you're real. You know
Yeah,
what?
it'd be good.
I have a topic that was requested, and I want to say this respectfully,
We
but
getting requests.
yeah, getting requests. Do you think that Fat Joe was possibly the I guess the weakest versus competitor we've seen so far in hip hop? Like, did Fat Joe really need a versus?
Mm, I mean, that's a loaded question.
I don't
I
know
mean,
if he had. Well, I guess he does have the catalog for it,
he
but
has the least notoriety in terms of legendary status of
right.
anybody who's done the verses, if that's what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, because you got
He's not
legendary
consi-
status
like
and then you
he's
got
not
hits.
he's not considered iconic the way like DMX or Snoop or the two guys who performed last night. No, but he is somebody that is integral and important part of this culture and always has been, kind of from the moment he stepped in the game.
I think that, again, like we said when we were recapping the Ja Rule and Fat Joe versus, I think what he did was admirable because he was the one that was going to give Ja Rule that shot. Because nobody else was going against Ja Rule, because Ja Rule, for whatever reason, in this industry has been ostracized.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. People act like what Ja Rule didn't happen or something. Like, and I respect the fact that Fat Joe went out there and used that as an opportunity for people to remember how much Ja Rule has done in his career.
Like he was going double, triple platinum like consecutively, and like was like yeah, like it's doing major numbers.
Terminator says Fat Joe is iconic. Shaking my head.
Yeah, Mike, he's part of the Digging in the Crates crew. Yeah, he's legendary. Jealous One's Envy.
He gave
Don
us Big Pun.
Yeah, Mike, he's made hit records and he's made street anthems. Like, yeah, Joe's iconic.
He's actually the catalyst of, the Puerto Rican, well, I don't want to just say Puerto Rican, but like
just the whole
the Latin
infusion.
hip hop movement. Because the Beat Nuts, they're Dominican. I fuck with the Beat Nuts, man.
Juju's crazy.
Juju's crazy with it, man. The Beat Nuts was always consistent. That's one of my groups that
Off the Books, man, that's one of my favorite hip hop records.
Yeah, when I start listening to Beat Nuts records, I probably end up listening to about 4 or 5 of them, and then it just keeps on going. So yeah, I mean, I think Joe was the person that opened the door for that. He kept it going. I mean, Joe gave us Pun, and I gotta say, Joe gave us Remy Ma too, right? I think that's fair.
Pun, yeah.
Well, I mean, Pun, obviously she was signed to Pun, but when Pun passed, he kept it going with her. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's what I mean. He's an important part of his culture, Mike. I mean, he's on, if I'm not mistaken, he's on KRS's Return of the Boom Bap album. That's what I'm saying. He's been around this shit for a minute, and he's got his own catalog to speak of. And I mean, he's been around and rubbed shoulders with the best of the best. And here's what I mean. He's an integral part of the culture. Like, he respects the culture. Like, he was doing, remember when they were doing that flashback with him and Big Les? He was in his store called Halftime. He named that after the Nas record because Nas is his favorite MC. Like, he's part of this culture like that.
I think he's more of a glue guy too because again he gave us John Blaze and we got a song because of his album. We got a song with Nas, Pun, Raekwon, and Jadakiss. You know what I'm saying? Like, he puts those things together. But it's interesting though, and I think a lot of people in the chat are saying that Joe's not iconic because if I ask you straight up, what's Fat Joe's best verse? Can you tell me?
His best verse?
In the chat, what is Fat Joe's best verse? We got like 46 people in the room. What's your favorite Fat Joe verse? Because usually when you got an MC, and he's not whack by no means, you know what I mean? He's a dope MC. He can rap. But it's hard for people to really pinpoint, you know what I mean? Because I had to think about that. When somebody asked me, like, what's Fat Joe's best verse? I'm like,
You want to know what? I just love him and Pun on Deep Cover 98 so much. So that's what I was immediately think of. Him on Deep Cover 98. That's my favorite shit that he's doing. I don't know why. Like, I feel what you're saying. He doesn't have no verbal intercourse. You know, he doesn't have that like by any means. He's never been that though, Mike, but he's been wildly consistent and an important part of this culture. Something needs to be said for that.
Well, I guess that's a tough question for anybody, right? Like, what's your favorite T.I. verse? Or what's T.I.'s best verse? You know what I mean? And he's somebody that we know has spazzed on records. But I'm sure you have a short list there. You know what I'm saying?
That third verse on Talking to You comes to mind.
That's funny you said that. I was thinking about that. When you said third verse, that's the first thing that popped in my mind. Yeah. I actually liked his third verse on What's Up, What's Happening, too. That was a strong
Mike, that's funny. That's the other one I was thinking about. That verse crazy, too. Those are my 2 favorite Tip verses.
I don't know if it's his best verse. Obviously, I like the man. This was on Uncut back in the day.
Mike, What's Up, What's Happening is like one of the most greatest diss records that's never talked about. That
it is, man. That shit was hard.
That shit hard.
I like Riding in the City and with the Bevel. The first verse on what's the name of that song? You know what
I know what you're talking about. Hold on.
Anybody trying grand hustle folk, I'm busting folk. I like a lot of T.I.'s mixtape stuff though. So you
Yeah, I'm
know what
about
I'm
to say, there
saying?
you go. I
Like,
knew he was about to do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
So
know what you feel the way about T.I.'s mixtapes the way I feel about Jeezy's mixtapes. It's like I'd rather hear the mixtape shit actually half the time.
I could probably pinpoint my favorite Jeezy verse before I could Fat Joe. That's wild, and I wonder why. And I'm not even a Jeezy fan like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like I don't know, man. It's like a lot of Fat Joe's verses. I mean, they're dope, but they kind of run together, right?
He's consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.